Wake that ass up.
Early in the morning.
The Breakfast Club.
Yes, it's the world's most dangerous morning show, The Breakfast Club. Charlamagne the God, Angela Yee. Envy is not here. He's out promoting his book, but we have a special guest. Miss Marianne Williamson is here. Good morning.
Good morning.
How's your energy?
My energy's okay, thank you.
See, I like that you said okay. That's an honest answer.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because I think after the pandemic, I've been asking people how they doing, how's your energy, and I think the answers have been very, very honest. Like people aren't just saying, "Oh, I'm fine," anymore.
I think that experience and a lot of things, I think Ukraine, the war in Ukraine, I think a lot of things are just like taking us right into what's true.
Mm-hmm.
There's a saying in Alcoholics Anonymous, every problem comes bearing its own solution. And I think the fact that there is so much that's upsetting today, like genuinely upsetting, like not kind of sort of upsetting, is actually taking us into the place within ourselves where we need to be to do the kind of thinking and acting that we need to do to transform things.
Do you think people are really upset about stuff, or is a lot of it just performative?
Oh, I think people are upset. Now, take something like Patrick, the black man who was killed yesterday by the police. Mm-hmm. Things are happening now that you can't say to yourself anymore, it's just one thing that happened. Mm-hmm. People are getting, that's my sense, I think people are getting that some of these systemic problems are in a way deeper than we might have thought. There's no longer any pretending to ourselves that some things aren't terribly, terribly wrong.
Yeah, you can't be human if you, sometimes I watch the news and you just end up getting really emotional. Like I'll cry watching the news when I see what they put on there. And some people say the news likes to report bad things mostly, instead of positive things. But you see so much happening, like even watching what happened in Brooklyn with the active shooter that was in Brooklyn on the train. Fortunately, they've captured him, but that's, something that was really hard to watch.
Well, you know how I feel listening to you say that is I'm glad you cry. I think the problem in America has been how many people have been so desensitized to terrible things.
That's why I asked if it was
I remember when we invaded Iraq and people didn't get, wait, we're dropping bombs on all these people who didn't do anything to us. Mm-hmm. This is not like ruining your day. And the fact that we were decent, I think the fact that people now, that's my point, to hear an American woman saying, I cried watching it, that's healthy. That's mental health. That's not mental dysfunction. I think that's true about a lot of the stuff people call, we're having a mental health crisis. Actually, what's happening, when you break a bone, you register pain. Your brain registers pain because you have to reset the bone. When things are really, you have to reset your thinking, you have to reset your country, your psyche registers pain. Mm-hmm. That's mental health, not lack of mental health. Mm-hmm. So I think the fact that people are in this very real place is where we need to be in order to move to the next thing, which is, okay, what are we going to do?
I agree with you. That's why I asked if a lot of people are just, doing performative things, because I feel like if everything causes outrage, then what's actually outrageous? And it seems like everything causes outrage nowadays except for what we should actually be upset about.
Thank you. I feel the same way. We have such a thing about these microaggressions and little things when it's huge things that are causing untold suffering for generations and for peoples around the world. I so agree with you. We need to learn to lighten up about, what to ignore, and what to get very, very serious about. And by giving so much attention to things that aren't the most important, I do think that we're using it as almost a screen.
Even watching Ukraine and what's happening there.
Yeah.
To children, to innocent people, I don't even understand what is, why this is even happening, right? It's completely unnecessary. Clearly, like, the president of Russia, they're even hesitant to say anything negative about him, it feels like. At first. They didn't want to use certain words. They didn't want to say certain things. And then you watch the news and you see kids being killed. You see hospitals being bombed. You see mothers. You see all of those things happening. And then you also hear people saying, well, it's really, not our business.
Well, I don't agree with it's not our business part, but one of the reasons they're careful in what they say about him is because he is who he is, obviously, and he has a nuclear bomb. Mm-hmm. The thing that deeply concerns me about Ukraine is this horror will be over. But America has a way of making mistakes and then going, oops, maybe we shouldn't have done that. we have not really looked at what happened in Iraq. We have not really looked at what happened in Afghanistan. And we have not really looked, which is in no way to justify what Putin is doing. But we do need to have a serious conversation about American foreign policy regarding NATO, regarding Russia over the last few decades. We have farmed out our thinking, and the corporate media has supported us in farming out our thinking. And clearly, and this is true with the environment, it's true with the state of our democracy, it's true with the state of our economy, it's true with the state of foreign policy. These people have spectacularly failed, okay? Okay, they have spectacularly failed. Should we stop looking to them? I mean, because I'm sure personally many of them are nice people, but the entire neoliberal economic and political order has taken us so close to the cliff. And I think that, it's all part of the same thing. It's realizing how bad it is and realizing if we're going to rethink this, it's going to be us having to do it. And when you said before you don't even know what happened, that it got this bad, that's because too much of mainstream media treated you like, don't you worry your pretty little head about that, because these really serious, sophisticated foreign policy experts are handling this. Yeah, they handle it. Yeah, they handled it. They sure did handle it.
It is so true, though, because even when you watch these institutions that are supposed to report these things, like if you're watching CNN, MSNBC, they will do breaking news about Ukraine or something that's actually impacting us to talk about Will Smith slapping Chris Rock.
When I was a
Tom
kid,
Brady retiring.
When I was a child, breaking news meant something.
Yes.
When I was a child, breaking news meant, ooh, come to the TV, guys, there's some breaking news. Now, Justin Bieber had a DWI. Breaking news. And so there's no sense of perspective, and that's what the news media used to be. But there's a lot of independent news media that does really great work, so I'm not saying it's not out there. But it's certainly not necessarily what you find.
But sometimes it's hard to know who even to, because depending on what you're watching, you get a whole different view of what's going on.
Do you ever watch Breaking Points with Crystal Ball and Sagar and Jetty? I think they're great. Do you know them?
I mean, I heard the show, but I haven't watched it.
Yeah, I just think it's really, because he's kind of like this high-minded, more conservative person, and she's real progressive, and I think they're great.
Because it presents both sides, so
yeah,
you can see it.
Yeah. I mean, they and a real get down, get real, what's happening about things. I just find that if I watch them, and I love Brianna Joy Gray, and I love Katie Halper, I love David Sirota, I love Matt Taibbi. I mean, there are a lot of great people, and there's you.
Yeah, you're a thought leader. You're a spiritual leader. You also ran for president. Do you think that system will ever change? Like, do you think they'll?
I think what?
You think that system will ever change? The political system? You think they'll actually let someone in that will absolutely change things?
Yes.
Really?
Because I believe in miracles, and we had one recently. I think that this issue of what happened with Christian Smalls at Amazon is so historic.
Really?
Oh my God! Yes.
Okay, break it down.
Okay. All right. First of all, we hear about David and Goliath, okay, which is, it's a David and Goliath story. So he wanted to unionize an Amazon warehouse on Staten Island, 8,000 people. Amazon spent over $4 million on anti-union consultants, et cetera. Christian Smalls had $120,000 that he got on a GoFundMe page. But let's talk about David and Goliath, because it's bigger. It's like an archetype. All biblical stories and scriptural tales are deep, like myths, and tell us some deeper truth. So David was not a warrior. That's really big. Christian Smalls was not a union organizer. But Goliath was so big. He was a shepherd. He was somebody, that's a big deal. David was a shepherd.
That's right.
And David was there just to bring some food to his brothers, etc. Okay. So they were all terrified of, everybody's terrified of Amazon, even though they were mistreating these workers so badly, even during COVID. So he wasn't a union organizer. And one of the things that's so fascinating to me is King Saul in the Bible said to David, well, if you're going to do this, the least I can do for you is to give you my coat of armor. David put it on, and do you remember what he said? He said, I can't move around. If I'm going to do this, I have to do it my way. And he took it off. So Christian Smalls had gone down to Bessemer, Alabama, where they were trying to unionize Amazon with all the best union organizers and stuff. And he even said, maybe I could help. No, you're just a worker. We're like union organizers. We know. He goes back to New York, and all the union experts start calling him and emailing him. Well, we can help you. He said, no. You don't know this warehouse. I know this warehouse. I know these people. And he got a folding table, and he put it up near the bus stop where all the workers were coming, off the bus and onto the bus all day and all night. And they sang and they prayed and they got to know each other and they built community. And it was a real love thing. He said on the podcast, on the New York Times daily podcast the other day, he said it was spiritual. He said this effort was built on love. And in the end, they won the vote. And there's, I'm sure he was described by the general counsel of Amazon as not articulate and not smart. That was, and this man emails that to 1,000 people. And if ever there was, famous, and then the general counsel of Amazon had even said, well, we hope he will be the mascot. If ever there were famous last words, watch what you wish for.
Yeah.
So when I say, this will be in history books, what Christian Smalls, because this is given psychological and emotional. There are people at Starbucks all over the country. There are people at Amazon. There are people at trying to unionize in businesses all over the country. Howard Schultz at Starbucks said, we're being assaulted. Yeah, because capitalism must reform itself, or this can't continue this way. It has become a serfdom. It's become a system that exploits people on levels that are just not okay. And if the government won't fix it, the people will. That's the point of the labor movement. And so I think what Christian Smalls did is a moment of, nobody would have thought it was possible.
So what do you think this win does for other warehouses and workers trying to create a union?
What do I think what?
What do you think the win does for other warehouses and workers?
Oh, it makes them feel it's possible.
Right.
Okay.
Because that's what everybody said to him. Oh, it's not possible. Everybody said, he can't do this. He's not a union organizer. He's just this guy with a folding table. He's not a union organizer. Now, when you hear him, nobody's laughing now. I don't know if you've had him on.
No, not yet.
He's really something. And now you just see people waking up. The reinvigoration of the labor movement is such an important thing. When I was growing up, it was a big thing. And then as part of the whole neoliberal corporatist corporations get whatever they want agenda that started about 40 years ago, there was this deliberate attempt to squash unions, and there was some malfeasance and corruption within them too. So to see younger people. There's a man named Max Alvarez from the Real News Network. He's great too. And he was talking about, I'm watching all these millennials reading labor manuals from the 1930s.
Wow.
Yeah.
Because, not much has changed.
Huh?
Not much has changed.
Well, what's changed is that young people are rediscovering, we can do this.
That's right.
We can push back. And I think for those of us who are of a certain age, we have an institutional memory of a time when it, on those levels, was not this bad. And not that it was perfect, but there was a social consensus that we were supposed to push back on unfair forces. And some people, I think, just have never seen it. And it concerns me to see how many people are just kind of like depressed and cynical. And
Right.
so when you say, will it ever change? Yeah. There was abolition, but then there was abolition. There was slavery, but then there was abolition. There was the institutionalized suppression of women, but then there was women's suffragette movement. There was segregation, but then there was the civil rights movement. It's simply our turn. And what if those people had said it can't ever change?
Right.
Yeah.
And sometimes progress isn't overnight. Most of the time it's not. It's a long process.
I was thinking the other day, Martin Luther King, the reason he was in Memphis when he was assassinated, remember, was for the striking garbage workers. And so I think that's so profound that it was for a strike, for people trying to unionize. Striking garbage workers. So he didn't make it. He said, I'm not going to make it. And somehow all those decades later, Christian Smalls says, there's something very profound about it.
Yeah, I have faith in people. It's hard to have faith in government, especially when you see so many blatant, civil liberties and rights being taken away from the people. And it's like the people that we voted for and put them in position, they don't seem to have the outrage over our voting rights being stripped away. I was reading this article this morning about how even somebody like Joe Manchin was championing voting rights, and Biden said he would be the person to restore voting rights, and they've done nothing.
or to, with all due respect, and liking her on a personal level, coming here to talk about hot sauce rather than all that. Hello.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I like her as a person, but is we must call out everything that needs to be called out now. Yeah.
And student loan debt, that's something that you've been discussing, and that has been something that Joe Biden ran on, that we still haven't seen what was promised.
And I think what you just said is the point. It needs to be said. He ran on it. He ran on canceling it in terms of historically black colleges. It's certainly not only a racial issue, but in part a racial issue. You've got about $1.75 trillion of college loan debt. You've got 45 million people carrying this debt. 2/3 of them are women. You know, Breonna Joy Gray was saying to me the other day, she said, black people were told during the 90s that you'll close the wealth gap by getting an education. But so many, and black and white people thought, well, okay, I'll be able to close the wealth gap. I'll be able to create wealth if I get an education. But then these college loans they're so shackled by these college loan debts that in many cases they're not even taking jobs that they were educated for, because they need to get they don't have health care and so forth. And some of these people are assuming they'll just kind of die with these debts. I can't even imagine what it would be like to be in your 20s and to be carrying tens of thousands of dollars of debt. It's immoral. It's immoral. And once again, if you're old enough, you remember even 30 years ago, the average person going to college came out with maybe $3,000 worth of debt. It should be free. We should be doing everything that would help people thrive. That's where the wealth of a nation is. You know, I was looking, it's interesting, because I was looking a few minutes ago, sitting in the lobby, and there's all this wonderful iHeart, you know, and you see all these really brilliant musicians. How many millions of American kids would be just as brilliant if they went to school where they were taught music and given opportunity? I mean, you really, you know, if you're in the club in America, no pun intended, it's a fantastic place to be. Not enough people can get in the club right now. And people are shackled. You know, if you have kids who, you know, we have, when I was running one of the things I would be told a lot, we have elementary school kids on suicide watch. We have millions of American children who can't even afford to, I didn't mean can't afford, who can't read by the age of 8. And if you can't read by the age of 8, your chances of high school graduation are decreased. Your chances of incarceration are vastly increased. So, like you were saying, is the government going to fix this? Apparently not. But if we make enough noise and we inconvenience the system enough, and we do exactly what Christian Smalls did in our own way, then I feel that we can pierce a wall. I mean, cynicism is just an excuse for not helping. We can't look at it like, well, there's just nothing we can do.
I love this tweet you put out. Joanne Reed asked Elizabeth Warren whether there wasn't a moral hazard involved in canceling the student debt, but the moral hazard was making the attainment of a higher education such a weight on the back of people simply trying to better themselves to begin with. Can you expound on that?
Well, you know, that all these people saying, well, you don't want to cancel this debt because people shouldn't think that their debts are going to be just wiped away. These debts should not have ever existed. Higher education should be free. In every advanced democracy, it is either free or very cheap. And it used to be very cheap here. We have a neoliberal corporatist economic system that turns human suffering, human hardship, human frustration and despair into a profit center. That's true whether it has to do with private prison system. It's true whether it has to do with healthcare, mental health care, whether it has to do with these schools. People are just trying, they're told, get an education, you can make it. But then they get an education and it's the system. It's true when people say the system is rigged against them. But it doesn't have to be this way. And we have to make sure that it changes. It's as simple as that in my mind, or at least I try.
Now, I saw you tell thehill.com, you said the difference between two political parties is performative.
Well, the way I look at it is I look at the Republicans as representing a nosedive. I look at Democrats representing a managed decline, like you were talking about. You know what I mean? The status quo will not disrupt itself.
Word.
And it looks at people like all of us in this room, and the subtle hidden messages. What are you complaining about? You got in. And we got it. That's one of the big things we have to go, ooh. I want more people to get in, not just me.
Right.
Do you know, how do you feel the Biden administration is doing?
You know, the president, if he wanted to, could use an executive order to declare a medical emergency and expand Medicare to everyone tonight. We have millions of people. I think it's 31 million people still uninsured. We have 1 in 4 Americans cannot afford to fulfill the prescription that their doctors have given them. The president could, this whole business about canceling the college loan debt. Everyone from Chuck Schumer to Elizabeth Warren, people are begging him. First of all, if for nothing else, how are you going to win in 2022 if you're not doing anything for people that you told that you were going to do something? I don't think people are going to want to stand in line for 7 hours because you fixed the roads. And so he could do that. He could do that. He says he'll cancel $10,000 of the debt if Congress gives it to him. They use, if Congress will send it to me, if the parliamentarian is okay with it. They use these excuses. He could also deschedule marijuana from a Schedule I drug. I mean, that would, so many people's lives. Let these people out of prison. I mean, it's so horrible what's happened. There's this underbelly of American society. And when I was growing up, we did think of the Democratic Party as a pretty unequivocal conduit for standing for the working people of the United States. And now it's...
Why do you think that's changed?
It changed with Bill Clinton, who, once again, it's hard for me because I like him as a person. I think he's a nice man. We've got to get over this, yes, but he's a nice man, or Bush was a nice man. Bill Clinton came in and he said, well, we can play with the big boys too. And he started something called the Democratic Leadership Council. And he created a situation where now the Democrats are both. The corporate Democrats now are like the Eisenhower Republicans when I was growing up. And then the lefties, which I would think of myself, didn't used to be considered weird. It was a major part of what should be considered weird about saying people should have health care in the richest country in the world. What should be considered weird and fringe about saying people should be able to get an education.
That's right.
And that's how, or even the canceling of the college loan debt. You've got, I was reading this morning, Warren Gunnels, if you cancel that $1.75 trillion debt and you distributed it to the 735 billionaires in this country, they wouldn't have any more money than they had before the pandemic. That money will go right into the economy. In 2017, they passed a $2 trillion tax cut that will never pay for itself. And 83 cents of every dollar went to the very richest people among us. So where are you going to spend your money, guys? Why are you only spending your money on the 0.0% of 1%? It's insane. I'm all for making money. I think more people should be able to make money. The problem is not that making money is bad. The problem is not enough people. So many people are just locked out. I read a book years ago called The Gardens of Democracy. And they used a really good image. They said, imagine if all your blood went to one arm. The blood has to circulate. And that's this massive transfer of wealth into the hands of only a tiny few people. It's just, it's destroying democracy, but more than that, maybe it's destroying lives.
Did you see that movie, The Platform, on Netflix?
No, tell me about it.
Okay, no, it's kind of about that. But it's about capitalism, but it shows like it's all these different levels, and at the top it's a huge feast. So the people on the top eat, and then it goes to the next level, and then the people under there. But say there's 100 floors, by the time it starts going down, there's less and less and less, food for the people on the lower levels.
Absolutely.
It's an interesting
literally,
movie
by the way, we do have hunger in America.
That's right.
We have hunger in America.
Right.
Millions. We have 13 million children who are homeless every year. We have 500,000 people who are homeless. This is
That's why you got Project Angel Food.
that was originally for people who were with HIV and
Really?
AIDS. Yeah, that's what it was originally for homebound people with AIDS. And now as AIDS treatment has gotten better, it's now for anyone who is homebound and needs that help. But as I say all the time, and I have such admiration for the people, it has fed 14 million meals.
It's a lot of food.
But it is sad to me that it's necessary. You shouldn't have so many sick, hungry people in America. And there is no amount of private charity that can compensate for a basic lack of social justice.
Mm-hmm.
I'm all for charity and nonprofits, but at a certain point, you can't have just such an unjust system and then say to nonprofit organizations and churches, handle all the pain that arises from this, okay, guys? No. I remember, this was how I originally got so interested in some political stuff. When politicians would say to me, what should we do about the mental health crisis? And I remember saying to somebody very highly placed, why don't you stop driving everybody crazy? That would help. Your economic policies. You think that chronic economic despair that people are living in and day out, the fact that people working a minimum wage job full time, that there's no place in America that that they could rent a 2-bedroom apartment, and you think it's their mental health problem rather than your mendacity and selfishness and greed and corruption and whoredom?
Mm-hmm. I don't even think we recognize what mental illness looks like anymore. Because when I see what happened to that guy in Brooklyn yesterday, he's clearly mentally disturbed.
Yeah.
Clearly. So what do you do with somebody like that?
Well, one of the things that we need to do a lot more of, and that they do in academic circles, but it's kind of like the science with the environment. We have people who have the information that's needed in everything. We know we could transform this country. We could help transform this world. And there are people who know how to do it. But the problem is they are not the ones who are necessarily listened to in Washington, and they're not the ones who have the ideas that are turned into policy. Mm-hmm. So we have many people who understand criminal psychology, who will tell you, if you could look at a violent crime that's for which people are in prison today, and the vast majority of them were abused children. Mm-hmm. The vast majority of them have multiple what's called adverse childhood reactions. Now, this is not to say anyone should not be held accountable. But if we know these things, if we know that poverty, if we know that certain conditions are a petri dish out of which this kind of societal dysfunction is almost inevitable, then why don't we act on those root causes?
Right.
Mm-hmm. They're not acting on the root causes because to them the symptom is just treat the symptom, more police, more prisons, more bombs, rather than preventative disease. But going back to something said earlier, I think there's a critical mass of people in this country who know this. That's what I learned running for office. The people are not stupid. I think sometimes people in Washington they willfully ignore things. They're not stupid either. Mm-hmm. They willfully ignore. And my sense is that the American people are, that was my experience running. People are smart. My father used to say to me years ago, he was a lawyer, and he used to say, and I learned this about my career that I've had for 40 years, he said, talk to the smartest person on the jury. And politicians talk to people like they're stupid. Mm-hmm. And what I've seen over and over again is if you talk to people like they're smart, guess what? They actually are. Mm-hmm. But they're not used to being talked to like they're smart.
Mm-hmm. Would you run for office again?
I think about it, but I'm also aware of how brutal it is. I would say that my experience was 1/2 brutality, 1/2 exhilaration. And it's not something you do lightly.
We're definitely at a tipping point. I only got a couple more questions. How did the messaging for Democrats get so bad? Like, how did things like voting rights become considered far left talking points?
Stop excusing them. You keep excusing them. It's not their messaging, it's their policies.
Oh, the policies suck, definitely.
So this idea that they need better messaging, you wouldn't need better messaging if you had better policies. Your messaging should be, guess what? We canceled the college loan debt. You don't have that. You can go thrive
You're
now.
Right.
The messaging should be, guess what? You got health care. This idea that the only thing they need is better messaging.
No, you're right. We passed the John Lewis Voting Rights Act. We passed George Floyd police reform. No, you're right. You're right. But even they do it in the House, right? But then the Senate always votes against it. But then I can't excuse them for that because that's too many.
Yeah, and then there's so much that the president could do with executive order.
Why do you think he doesn't do it?
Well, I'm not in his heart. I do wonder as much as anybody does, what are they thinking over there? What are they thinking? What are
You
they
and me
thinking is
both.
going to happen in 2022? Everybody has their theories. I can't presume to know. But at a certain point, I don't care. You know, at a certain point, I remember saying to some young people on a Zoom call about running for office, he said, how do we pressure these politicians? I said, at a certain point, you don't think pressuring them, just think in terms of replacing them.
Yeah.
And I hope all of you, I said to these young people, will think of running yourself.
Maybe it's just prophecy, though.
Maybe it's what?
Maybe it's prophecy. Maybe it's just meant for everything just to collapse. Maybe it's meant for American democracy as we know it to die.
When you say that, it's like people who say to me, Marianne, don't worry about the state of the planet. It's just going to have to throw us off for 200, 300,000 years. But it'll be okay. When you think in your mind what that means, it is a scenario of such immeasurable human suffering. Do you have children?
No.
Do you have children?
I have 4 daughters.
Okay. All right. So I'm sure you have had moments when you have said, that will not be happening in this house.
Absolutely.
That's how we have to be.
Right. It is actually
Nobody's going to say, maybe it's just prophecy that your kids just don't make. No. And I feel we need that fierce thing. No,
Right.
that won't be happening.
But we've
then
all
it feels
been
like they
fighting, though.
suppress you so much that you feel like, forget it. I'm not even going to bother. It is a very cynical approach when so many things are happening. That's kind of what people want, right? They want you to feel like change is impossible and there's no point in doing that so that you're not fighting for things.
Well, that's what concerns me, that cynicism. It's an excuse for not helping. When I was a little girl, my father used to walk around the house when we were little, like when we'd wake up in the morning, beat the system, kids, beat the system. It took me years, decades to know he actually wasn't kidding, was he? And when I think in terms of, I was having this conversation with Brianna just the other day. She said, well, you could just kind of try to be happy, not to me personally, but everything you guys are saying. But I feel for myself, if I made a certain choice that was like, well, nothing we can do, just try to live, I feel like I'd hear this voice of my father. The bastards got to you, didn't they, little sister?
Yeah.
At the very least, I try.
But who's the bastards?
The system, the way the system operates.
Both
it's
sides.
not individuals. It's an amoral economic system. It's not like people wake up in the morning and say, how can I make life miserable for people? No, it's just that they don't feel they have a moral responsibility to make life better for people. It's the myth of neutrality. And ultimately what we're coming to understand, if you have an amoral economic system, it will have immoral consequences. You can't just say, I'll just leave my kids alone. You have to help them, teach them, take care of them. And this country should not be run like a business. It should be run like a family. We should be saying, what are we going to do to make every child have a world-class education, every child have world-class culture and art? How are we going to help people thrive? It's insane that we look at it differently. And I don't know. Like I said, for me, it's like if Christian Smalls can do it, he's my hero of the week. And I think he's going to be, this is historic what he did. They'll be talking about him in textbooks 50 years from now.
Well, I have one simple question for you, Go. We talked about it. None of the campaign promises have been kept, right?
I don't know if none of them are.
Well, John Lewis, the big ones. The big ones. John Lewis Voting Rights Act, George Floyd Policing Act.
Oh, the policing,
Build Back
the
Better.
fact that BLM
Student
was
loan
the
debt.
largest. It was the largest protest movement in the history of this country, and there has not been one fundamental legislative action.
That's right. So those 4 things haven't happened. So what do you tell people to vote for in 2022?
Well, if the only difference, listen, I have a website called candidatesummit.com with people who are non-corporate backed congressional candidates, and I really urge everyone to go there and donate. Most of those people are running as Democrats, but they are not running as Democrats unaware of the problem. This lock that the two parties have on the system is part of the problem. But some people will feel moved to work on that running as Democrats. Some people will feel moved to do it running third party. Abolition came from the Abolitionist Party. Women's suffrage came from the Women's Party. Social Security came from the Socialist Party. So throughout our history, third party voices have been very significant. Back several decades ago, the Democrats and the Republicans really formed this unholy alliance to make it very difficult for anyone else to get in. But we have to be strategic. So some people will feel, when I ran for Congress, I ran as an independent thinking it was so pure in principles. But you know what? I also learned how naive it was. Depends on where you are, what district you are, what state you are, what office you're running for. Everybody has to find these deeper answers about what we do individually in our own gut and in our own guidance.
Marianne Williamson, always a pleasure.
Oh, it's always a pleasure to see you, too.
No,
Thank
I'm
you.
happy. I
Thank
wish you would come every time you're in New York.
Thank you. Thank you.
But thank you. It's Marianne Williamson. It's The Breakfast Club.